Hey, what's up? So, we're here with the nighttime stories. Apologies it took so long, but let's get this started. Kind of get set up and we'll hop in. In tonight's story, we're going to talk about someone who we haven't. Temujin Kensu. All right. So, everybody, I like to introduce someone, but I first start off with, has anybody here dealt with a family member, a loved one, someone you love, being railroaded by the system, not even given a fair chance at a trial, and taken away? These type of things affect your life just as well as theirs. The kids, parents, mothers, sisters, brothers, cousins, it affects everyone. Fredrick Freeman was convicted of murder in 1987 and given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. But at the time of the crime, Freeman was more than 400 miles away. More than 30 years later, Freeman, who also goes by the name Temujin Kensu, is still in prison with health care is being denied, where health care is being denied and poor prison conditions are preventing his healing. Freeman has several underlying health issues, including a brain tumor and congestive heart failure, that make him particularly vulnerable to viruses. His attorneys at University of Michigan Law School Innocence Clinic are now fighting to restore Mr. Kenzu's freedom and possibly to save his life. They filed for clemency through Governor Whitmore. Freeman was nowhere near the crime. Freeman was accused of killing a man in the community college parking lot in Port Huron, Michigan, but receipts and at least 9 neutral witnesses placed Kensu in Escanaba, a town 400 miles away in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, shortly before and after the time of the murder, making it physically impossible for Freeman to have committed the murder and be in Escanaba. Interesting. Because murder, Port Huron, and of course, suspect. Okay, that's the UP. At his trial, the prosecution presented the theory that Kensu could have chartered a plane to explain the timeline of his locations, despite the fact that such a flight would have been well beyond Kensu's means. Additionally, no actual evidence of such a flight was ever presented, and it was later discovered that the pilot who testified to the possibility of such a chartered flight was in fact the prosecutor's friend and personal pilot. The inadequate defense he received? At trial, Kensu's defense attorney failed to object to several days' worth of speculative and extremely prejudicial testimony, including outlandish suggestions that Kensu was part of a secret ninja organization, the Yakuza, an organized crime syndicate based in Japan. At the time of Kensu's trial, his attorney was a habitual cocaine user, for which he was later suspended for practicing law in Michigan. A judge ruled that the drug use made him constitutionally inadequate as a defense attorney. The convictions rested on weak eyewitness identifications, including a witness who was hypnotized. There were no eyewitnesses to the actual shooting, but two men claimed to see someone resembling Kensu hours before and moments after hearing the gunshot. One of the witnesses who testified seeing Kensu was hypnotized before he testified by his community college professor, who had never hypnotized anyone before. It was recently revealed that these identifications were obtained through a biased photo lineup that was manipulated to make Kensu stand out to the witness. Both witnesses wavered on many key details. Unreliable jailhouse informant testified against Freeman, but later admitted to lying. At trial, Philip Joplin testified that Kensu had confessed to him while they were incarcerated, but years later Joplin signed an affidavit admitting for the first time that he received special benefits from the prosecution in exchange for testifying against Kensu. He stood by this statement and fully recanted his trial testimony in a filmed interview with an investigative reporter. Kensu has severe health problems that put him at extremely high risk of serious illnesses or deaths if he becomes ill with COVID-19, which is running rapidly through the prisons. They have redone their food list coming up, so check in on your family members who are locked up, especially the ones who were locked up for crimes they did not commit. Wrongful convictions are at an all-time high and have been for at least the past 20 years. Kensu is an American man who was convicted of first-degree murder in 1987 for shooting of Scott Malcolm in Port Huron. He is sentenced to life without parole. I've had multiple communications with Mr. Kensu, and he's like any parent who's worried about his children. He's also like any man that's in there, overstimulated, railroaded, forgotten. They just want a chance to be heard. Most of these men have only asked for retrials, and the evidence that was not shared during the trial or not presented faulty. Prosecutors, judges who decided that they were not going to do justice by the honor system and reveal things, the ones who held on to evidence, paperwork was not found. The list goes on. These men and these women just want a fair chance. Mr. Kensu actually has a website, www.temujin.com. Temujin, Kensu.com. This man has been in prison for over 30 years. David Dean was Temujin's court-appointed attorney, who was later disbarred. So, has any of his cases been reviewed? Since the man was found to have been on cocaine and could not effectively do his job as counsel. The Kensu FBI profilers review case from perspective of victim Scott Macklin. This really is an unsolved murder that has a guy railroaded in prison.
Tonight, a special story you'll be talking about tomorrow. Channel 7's Bill Proctor has been researching on his own time over the past 15 years the claims of a man who has spent the last 20 years of his life in prison. And Bill joins us now with his arguments of innocence. Bill?
Carolyn, the St. Clair County prosecutor presented sketchy evidence to the jury in this case. A murder, he said, was committed over a woman. But now, a highly respected jurist says the system has made a horrible mistake.
My impression of it was that had I been the trial judge, I would have directed a verdict for the defendant and of an acquittal.
Not guilty for lack of evidence would have been the decision of Thomas Brennan, the former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court and one of the founders of the respected Cooley Law School in Lansing. Brennan took the time recently to read every word of the 10-volume transcript in the 1987 murder trial that sent Fredrick Freeman to prison for life. Had Judge Brennan presided over that case, he would have sent Freeman home instead of to prison.
It would have meant that the matter was taken away from the jury and the decision would be made by the judge, which a judge has the power and right to do.
The undisputed facts that the son of Croswell's mayor, Scott Arnold Macklin, died from a single shotgun blast in the parking lot of St. Clair Community College on the morning of November 5th, 1986. That Scott's fiancée, Crystal Merrill, had a brief, stormy relationship with Freeman and testified at trial of Freeman's intimidation and violence toward her when they dated. But she had no knowledge of who killed Scott, and the jury chose to ignore the testimony of some of the 19 people who insist that Freeman was hundreds of miles away in Escanaba the night before and the day of the Port Huron murder. Judge Brennan says much of the case was built on the testimony of a jailhouse snitch, small-time criminal Philip Joplin, who lied about a Freeman confession. Before he died, Joplin admitted to me his statements to the jury were fabricated.
The prosecutor's office told me that when I made that statement to make sure that I turned towards the jury and looked at the jury.
But did Mr. Freeman ever say that to you?
No.
Did he ever say something about...
What's crazy is they use this tactic in prisons a lot. To get faulty evidence or stories to extend jail time for people. They do it to railroad confessions and everything else.
Victim screaming when he shot him.
No. Did he ever say he used a shotgun to kill somebody?
No.
To spend all my time telling anybody who would listen that I'm innocent and suddenly they'll come forward and say, oh, but I'll tell you that I did it, and plus I'll tell you details about it, and that was very shocking.
I interviewed Fredrick Freeman in prison more than a dozen years ago. He had by then changed his name to Temujin Kensu to reflect his Buddhist religion. But he never backed away from his innocence. Action News also gave him a polygraph, and the longtime Michigan State Police examiner who gave the test said he passed it.
It clearly shows me that Mr. Freeman did not shoot Mr. Macklin.
Yeah, they spent weeks talking about me in the papers before this happened. And with it being the mayor's son's election year, I don't think anybody was willing to admit they put their foot in their mouth.
Much more important defense testimony would have come from Michelle Woodworth, the young pregnant woman who was living with Freeman on the day of the murder. She, too, has passed a polygraph and told the examiner that she did not testify because she was frightened and intimidated by police, but she insists that she and Fred were in their home in Rock, Michigan, near Escanaba, at about the moment that Scott was murdered in Port Huron. These two men, the owner and a student at an Escanaba martial arts studio, say that Freeman was with them about 2 hours after the murder. But 12 jurors, including this man, Richard Pellegrin, believe that it was possible, as the prosecutor theorized, that Freeman, despite having so little cash he couldn't pay his rent, somehow found the money to charter a private plane to fly in, commit the murder, and fly back north to...
Sad thing about it is they did polygraph on him, the young lady he was with, and they still railroaded him in because the mayor's son was murdered. And they did a whole news story on Mr. Kensu. And this story was over 17 years ago. So the question is, why is he still in prison to this day? This is a print off from May. See the name? Hi, Bianca. See, my podcast isn't just to make resources available for people, resources that we need, partnering, gathering information, trying to place you with the needed help and the necessities. Since a lot of our help has been taken, has been stopped, it's time that we bring back the community. But in doing so, I was able to find out that there is over 10,000 men and women that have been railroaded since the early 90s in prison and forgotten about with botch cases, just similar to this one. Nothing adds up and the time doesn't add up, and the fact that the proper procedures were done, this man should not still be in jail. Let's go back.
Set up his alibis. Mr. Pellegrin admits that no evidence of such a flight was ever presented in court.
But they never showed you a pilot.
No, sir.
And they never showed you a plane.
No, sir.
And they never showed you how it really happened.
No, sir.
It was circumstantial. It was all circumstantial.
We have no evidence. It was just absolutely speculative and I think offensive to even allow that testimony without some connection to the case. So why, the experts asked, was so much presented at trial that never should have been allowed at all? Most blame the ineffective defense.
The sad thing about it is, this still happens to this day. To this day. It affects the lives of everyone.
Hi, my name is Paula Kensu, and this is Zena Kensu. She's tired. We're both tired of fighting this wrongful conviction. We are fighting for my husband, Temujin Kensu, who is wrongfully convicted of the murder of Scott Macklem in 1986 out of St. Clair County, Michigan. My husband has served 37 years out of a life without parole sentence, and he was born Fredrick Thomas Freeman, so a lot of the court original trial transcripts were under his birth name, but he was later changed his name while incarcerated to Temujin Kensu, and that is recognized by the state. Temujin was wrongfully convicted out of St. Clair County, Michigan, and St. Clair County does not have a conviction integrity unit. So Temujin's case was referred through the Michigan Attorney General's Conviction Integrity Unit, which is the state CIU. It's spearheaded by Dana Nessel, and it was created in 2019. Temujin's was one of the first cases submitted to the state CIU, and we received confirmation in...
Okay, so if we have these issues where almost every single county and court has wrongfully convicted or railroaded someone into jail or prison, why is there not an integrity unit for every county? I've been trying to navigate my way through, and there have been a lot of cases that have been sent to me to read, to go over, to build a profile, to try to help. And it is such a monstrosity of how these people are being treated. And I send my condolences to the 4 women who have died in our women's prison. And it's only one. That's what's sad. Here.
And at conferences, confirming the eligibility criteria from Robin Frankel, who is the director of the Michigan Conviction Integrity Unit through the state CIU. And she had confirmed at the time what was considered eligible criteria to be included in a CIU case. That criteria was on the Michigan State CIU website. It later changed after Temujin's case was accepted into the CIU, after his case was assigned, and after his case was starting to be investigated, the criteria on their website changed. The application stayed the same, however, and it is still the same to this day as far as I know. That criteria does not include being brought up in a previous case or appeal. So, to make a long story short, Temujin's case was accepted by the CIU. It was investigated for nearly 2.5 years. They closed the case without saying anything about his innocence or guilt, and they are fighting to release the CIU report, the recommendation to exonerate.
So, we have a news reporter who actually spoke to him. Him and the female that he was with at the time both took lie detector tests. He passed. And from what I'm seeing, from Port Huron to Escanaba, that is a whole 8-hour ride. 7 hours, 59 minutes, or 8 hours and 15 minutes. 8 hours, 11 minutes. How was he seen 2 hours after the murder and at home? There's no way. There's no way. And they presented so much faulty evidence at the time of the trial and railroaded this innocent man in jail, prison, and bounced him around for almost 40 years, if not give or take. Who's answering to this? Who's reaching out to these men, to the family, to the daughters, to the sons? Who is actually taking the time to care to go over this stuff? And he's not the only one. We're going to get in touch with a couple people who Mr. Kensu has referred us to talk to, who will speak more on his case as I look up a little bit more. He's an excellent writer as well. He's taken his time to really change the outlook. He's a Buddhist, but from what everybody is seeing, I don't see why his habeas corpus or his appellate was never pushed through. There's no way that man committed murder and was nowhere near. So, when he's released, who has to answer for this? Is it the police that railroaded him? Is it the lawyers who failed to do their job? Is it the judge who let the things go on? Who actually has to respond and be held accountable for these men and women? It'd be nice if this man could be released after Christmas this year. Former St. Clair County, Michigan prosecutor Robert Cleland. Original trial prosecutor Robert Cleland, current St. Clair County prosecutor, is now Mike Weldon. Around this time, it is important to examine the background of the original trial prosecutor as well as the current prosecutor. Michigan, who is refusing to acknowledge a wrongful conviction occurred in the Mr. Kensu's case, aka Mr. Freeman. The original trial prosecutor in Temujin Kensu's case was Robert Cleland, a Port Huron/Fort Gratiot native who later was awarded a federal judgeship, who believed that he may now be retired, according to the court clerk, who just referred us to the current prosecutor, Mike Weldon, who will discuss more in detail below. Mike Cleland was running for the state attorney general's office in Michigan just before the murder of Scott Macklin occurred. He lost the race to Frank Kelly, who was Michigan's longest-running attorney general. Some rumors state that he was asked to run and to throw the race so that Kelly would win. In exchange, he would be offered the judgeship, but that has not been confirmed. Efforts to uncover who nominated Cleland in the federal position have been obscured. However, we do know that Robert Evans, as a local St. Clair County pilot who was flying Cleland around the state of Michigan during the months prior to Kensu's trial, during his run for Attorney General. Unbeknownst to the jury, Cleland had his personal pilot and friend Bob Evans testify that it's possible that Kensu could have chartered a plane to fly downstate to commit the murder and then dash back up Michigan's Upper Peninsula in time to be seen by nearly a dozen witnesses. However, not a shred of evidence was provided. In 2010, Denise Page Hood, the Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court, Eastern District of Michigan, called out Cleland's prosecutorial misconduct and ruled that Temujin should be released or given a new trial. This is astonishing because Robert Cleland sits on the Judge Hood's own bench. We know of no case in the country where a chief judge has condemned a judicial colleague serving under her. Unfortunately, Hood's ruling was overturned in a poorly procedural grounds, tardiness in filing, having nothing to do with Temujin's actual innocence. Note, the perfunctory dismissal of his appeal based solely on a technicality would not have occurred but for the infamous Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, which now recognized as a badly flawed act. Over the years, Cleland has refused to comment on the Kensu trial. Mr. Robert Cleland, would you like to come to the stage? We would like to know why you haven't been backing to release Mr. Kensu. And why are you keeping him in there? And why won't you comment? Everybody makes mistakes. So own up to it. Another great blog post is Barb Kinney discusses Cleland's distortion of justice. And she accurately states that this prosecutor has displayed a stubborn disdain for the truth, the law, integrity, fundamental, fair play, justice, and the very principles of freedom upon which this nation was founded. The families that have been victimized, including the Macklins, face the possibility of never knowing the truth or receiving the justice that it deserves. Well, why don't you reach out to our governor, to the prosecutor's office in St. Clair County, to the current prosecutor, write them and ask them, why has this man still been in jail? And while you're writing them, please also write the parole board, because Mr. Frank Witherspoon is up for parole. And the questions that I would have for them. Frank is the flyer that I've been passing around, and the gentleman, that story that I've read a couple of times. Now, what gets me about his story is the way he was done as well. And we're going to come back to Mr. Kensu, don't worry. It's not tonight. These are some of the things that I have been working on. So I figured that I would let you all in. And if you wanted to help write to the parole board and the assistant attorney general on behalf of Mr. Frank Witherspoon, inmate 130108, Bellamy Creek, Michigan. I would be asking about concerns regarding the testimony evidence. There was evidence from Richard McClinton and John Jones about a firearm purchase, but during those times, Mr. Witherspoon was locked up and has proof. Then statements by Dolores Brinson, the sister of Mr. Witherspoon and the wife of the victim. We would also like to know what was her conversation and threats that were made to the police about what would she do to her husband, about how many calls, domestic violence or anything that was called into the home, and the background and history on the victim and his wife. Testimonies of Ray Foltz and Willie Johnson. Their accounts appear inconsistent with one another in the lack physical evidence. So I was trying to ask for clarification on their credibility. Ballistics and evidence weapon, they were mentioning 2 different guns and a gun that was actually found and rushed off to be tested and automatically said to be, or wondered if it was Mr. Frank's. And that weapon was found March 25th, 1980. A little bit up under a month. The shooting took place February 26, 1980 at 717 North Burdock. Detective Gay took the weapon after being found behind the Goodwill. But that weapon had came back and was not anything to do with Mr. Witherspoon, but was never presented or told that it was available during the trial, so it was withheld. Ballistics findings, whether the weapon tested was confirmed to be the murder weapon, it was later told in another by a ballistics expert that it was not that same weapon. Statements from the victim's son that was told to Mr. Witherspoon that he knows that he did not kill his father, and he heard his mother admit to doing so, allegedly. Whether a formal statement was ever taken, and if it was reviewed as a potential exculpatory evidence. If not, the critical testimony was not pursued. Destruction of case files and legal representation. With Mr. Frank Witherspoon stating from the beginning of his evidence, a lawyer is not supposed to, in filing appeals, a lawyer is not supposed to get rid of it. However, his did destroy it. Prior conviction at the age of 14 where he was railroaded. And then DNA testing is what Cooley Law wants to make available, even though he has a clear with Brady violation, person who they assigned, who warned him not to speak to media. Whereas media cares because they've had this man's information since around 2022, almost 5 years. we had additional questions and concerns. We wanted clarification on whether, and that includes Mr. Witherspoon himself, because nobody wants to answer the phone, and a lot of these attorneys do not take calls when they're jail calls. Gears Law, wondering if they still have the information from his trial. Can you all get in touch with me? From Grand Rapids, Michigan. The admission, where the mom confessed, why was none of this ever brought up? And when we wrote to find out, we could never find out. So if anyone wanted to help this gentleman, because he really does not want to die in jail, he's given him so many years of his life, please inbox me. I'll send you the information and you can write. Because all he has asked for was a fair retrial and evidence be presented and for the Brady violation to be looked at. And why were not statements, evidence, ballistics, murder weapon ever presented in court? And why were not the witnesses or statements of alleged credible witnesses ever reviewed or looked at or given? It was alleged that Mr. Witherspoon's sister was up under psychologists and that she was taking medicine. Was there ever evidence of that? There's so much that was not done. So if you'd like to help me in writing letters, well, you can write your own and send them. I'll post the information and we could try to bring a man home before Christmas to see his great-grandchildren, his grandchildren, to be a father again. It's sad that this family has went through so much hurt and pain. So let's try to put an end to a little bit of suffering today. All right, y'all. That's really all my show today. It's weird because I have to go through a lot of cases, and this is something I actually, it's a love and a hate thing. I enjoy it, but then I also get the ones where I just, you feel it. Next time, matter of fact, before we tap back in, I would like you next Thursday, of course, and we're going to work out a different time. So anybody who has a time suggestion, please, I'm looking for a time slot to hold up to 2 hours. Just up to on Thursdays. But our next one, Facebook, look up The Making of a Exoneree. Rudy Thomas. Rudy Thomas. I'm going to tap his page on the mind. And we're going to go over some more of Mr. Kensu's. And after we get done with Mr. Kensu, I'd like you to tap into Rudy Thomas because he already has a YouTube. He did an episode making an exoneree about how he was railroaded in the system as well. And if you have somebody railroaded, please let me know. I'm looking for some peace, some love, some light. Because I can't even lie, going through this stuff, you need a moment in life. Food for thought. The sheep fear the wolf, only to be eaten by the shepherd. I was sitting here self-reflecting and analyzing our positions, options, and the pieces we still have active on the chessboard. This is a massive chessboard we're battling on, sis. We have more ground to cover, stern decisions we must make, and actions we must enforce, execute to gain the leverage, and whatever advantage needed to ensure our triumph. On a chessboard this massive, having a keen eye is vital and imperative. The ability to see the raw in any outcome or compensate from it on any level will always keep you at the advantage. Must pay little to no attention to the real results caused behind a direct, indirect action. At times, it's best to view an effect from its ending state, the results, then rewind it back to its origin, beginning, cause of action. Sis, the chess game of life knows no emotion, race, nor gender. The game is not played with a weak mind, tender heart, nor is it played without means of someone obtaining victory. Be alert, and as always, aware of everything within your circumference, starting with learning to decipher the many masks people wear, and learn to identify the hidden agenda, the rest of the hearts of men. Jamal Hassan. These men have been through a lot, and so have these women. I want y'all to tap in. Take a little venture, take a little road, and as you do so, I would love for you to realize that even if somebody messes up and commits a crime, you don't have to treat them inhumane. They could be rehabilitated. We gonna speak on all of this in the upcoming shows. Also, we got some more on that book list. Y'all take it easy. Be out.